Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hot or Hype, the show where we quiz the everyday person on the street about trends in retail technology. This is a really fun time to be in retail. Technology is transforming the world around us, and the retail industry has been impacted greatly. We've seen in the last decade startups rise to huge prominence, and old retailers that we thought would be around forever die and go away. It's a time where retailers are investing a lot in different types of cutting-edge technology. Some of that technology right now is hot. Everybody knows they need to adopt it to bring their business to the next level and get really key business outcomes. Some of it is hype. Think the Gartner hype curve. It's early in the curve. Not everyone is investing in this technology, but it's very cutting edge and can create really exciting retail experiences. So, having said that, let's look at some of these technologies and see what our people on the street think of them. Are they hot or are they hype? Let's go. Oh, hey, how's it going? I am great. So, welcome to Hot or Hype. All right, so we're just getting the opinion from people on the street on different types of retail technology, whether you think they're hot right now or they're hype. You know, they're not, maybe some people are adopting them, but they're still really cutting edge. Okay, so question. Advanced analytics is being implemented across all areas of retail to improve forecasting and planning. Hot or hype?
Ooh, I think that's hot.
It's hot! Yeah, right on. Advanced analytics is very hot right now. Lots of retailers are implementing this all across their business. Have we found another contestant for Hot or Hype? Hello. Hi, Jeff. Hi, I'm Chris from Hot or Hype, the famous game show about retail technology. So I've got a hot or hype question for you. So this is about trends, technology, and retail. You just need to answer hot or hype. Do you think this is hot technology everyone's adopting right now in retail, or something that's really early on in the Gartner hype curve? Got it?
Got it.
Great. Okay. Omnichannel. Retailers are investing more to bridge the gap between e-commerce and brick and mortar retail. Hot or hype?
Hot.
It's hot! Oh, yes! You got it right! Good job. Yes. Omnichannel is very hot right now. Even though Forrester has declared it dead, lots of retailers are investing in this to help bridge that gap and bring better experiences to their customers. Thank you for playing. All right, let's go around to our next contestant for Hot or Hype. Hello. Hey, how's it going? Great. Awesome. Welcome to Hot or Hype. So we're just trying to get the word of the average person on the street, get your opinions, trends, technology, and retail. So you may know the rules to this game already. Essentially, I'm going to give you a question. You just need to answer, is this hot or is it hype? Ready? Awesome. Okay, great. Augmented reality and virtual reality. So augmented reality and virtual reality are being used for experiential selling and employee training. Hot or hype?
It is hotter than the sun.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is hype. Yes. Retailers and manufacturers are investing in this technology right now. You're right. But it's very cutting edge. It's very early on. It's early days. So it is still under the category of hype. But thank you for playing.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are back in the studio here for Hot or Hype with Paul Maher, our GM of Industry Experiences. Paul, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to the audience today and excited to talk about the future of supply chain.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you. Yes, exactly. That is exactly what we want to focus on. Mm-hmm. What does the future of supply chain look like? You know, we're thinking of it from a retail perspective, and of course, supply chain is a core part of retail and consumer goods companies. So what are you seeing out there in the industry today?
Yeah, I think you raised a good point. I mean, we have the blurring of the lines between retail and manufacturing, and we'll talk a little bit, and I have some slides we can kind of go through and just help kind of give us a kind of a train of thought. But, you know, let's start with, you know, supply chain. It's big, it's complex, it covers many areas. So I'll try and sort of to keep this sort of succinct. Look at some of the macro points. So let me just kind of click through, and we'll just let the slides help us drive some of the narrative. But, you know, sort of point of mind, you know, kind of as I think about the future of supply chain, it's always good to look back at what are the current challenges and what's driving potentially disruption and hopefully transformation. So, I mean, of course, retailers are having to adapt to really sort of a highly competitive industry, changing customer demands. I was reading recently, I think in 2020 there will be more millennials than any other generation. So, of course, just when you think about at the core of the customers and their needs and their expectations, it's fully changing. Think about just the retail sourcing environment. It's super complex, if you think about it. And just think about some of the core systems around PLM and SCM. I mean, they are just super complex systems spanning multiple sets of deliverables. And then things like communication, collaboration is another area that's really, I would say, has been ineffective due to the inability to really connect information and processes. So with that as sort of the grounding, if you will, or sort of my opening statement, start with what are some of the key pressures in supply chain? And again, I'm going to keep this sort of super high level. Supply chain covers kind of a multitude of areas, but I'll try and touch upon some of the kind of the key talk track and the key points. But I mean, let's just kind of look at it. Changing customer demands, as we just said, kind of the more millennials than any others. Complexity of supply chains is ever increasing, and the cost of supply chain. Let's keep moving along. The need to optimize in high cost locations. Yes, high cost locations. So with new business models, the need to drive more efficiencies, we've really got to look at those high cost locations and see how can we use them more effectively. And then the inverse, right? So thinking about, historically, and this is a little counterintuitive to say it, but this just shows the way the evolution has occurred. Outsourcing has been king for the longest times, but now outsourcing is actually becoming less competitive, really because of the globalization of outsourcing. So we're dealing with some interesting complexities. And again, my point is supply chain is not easy, right? So now let's, on this slide, this is sort of, again, just some of the main talking points. As we think about transformation of supply chain, what are we looking for? So, well, of course, increased speed to market is super important, of course. The hope, of course, digital transformation and digital technologies will help really drive that transformation and enable new innovation. Of course, things like moving away from the traditional linear supply chains and looking for dynamic value networks that will allow increased differentiation is going to be important. And this, I think, is one of the number one things that comes up, of course, visibility. How do we get better visibility into the supply chain, which we've said is super complex and vast. And then finally, looking at things like being able to look at bimodal supply chain strategies. So that will enable not only innovation and disruption, but allow you to maintain sort of core traditional capabilities also. So these are some of the things that we're hearing as we think about the challenges and the needs for transformation that are sort of that are point of mind. And I think as we think about transformation and technology driving transformation, these are kind of some of the key points that we need to touch upon as we think about transforming the supply chain. But hey, what gives you and I, Chris, credibility as Microsoft employees? Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that Microsoft actually are in the retail business and the supply chain business. So I thought before we continue the journey, we talk about transformation, what's driving transformation. Let's just ground ourselves in sort of Microsoft's credibility and our role to play in retail and supply chain. Sure. So let's just start with what do we have? Well, probably one of the big kind of assets that we have that's one of the unknown assets is, of course, is Xbox. And yes, Microsoft own Xbox. Of course, we have Surface devices, of course, which requires retail and manufacturing. And of course, we actually manufacture PC and hardware peripherals as well. So we're actually in this game, this retail and manufacturing game, pretty large scale. And you can see some of the stats on the slide here, but I'm just going to call out a couple of points. I mean, in terms of our supply chain, we ship to 30,000 locations. I mean, that's pretty substantial, right? Yeah. And if you look at our annual spend, $8 billion. So we're in this to kind of stay, and it's a big play for us as Microsoft. So we've had to sort of learn this play ourselves, and thankfully we've been able to share those learnings from our play around retail and manufacturing and share that more broadly as we think about technology innovation, and of course being on shows like this today to talk about kind of really what are the learnings that we can pass to our audience. So let's look at some of our own supply chain challenges. Well, of course, just as the audience probably listening, we've got things like ever increasing pricing pressures and margins, the need for shortening of life cycles, increasing customer demands. But I would really distill it down to one thing that was kind of the uber change that we needed to make, which was aging processes and systems and tooling. And that's really at the core of our change and our disruption and our transformation. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we move along. But before we continue the journey, what's driving this transformation other than the complexity of supply chain? Well, of course, technology. And so, if we look at the core of this thing called digital transformation and we ground ourselves in some of the fundamental pillars, well, of course, cloud. Cloud is a big player in driving and enabling digital transformation. So look here, $1 trillion in IT spend invested moving to the cloud by 2020. That's not an inconsequential number. Data, we have this data explosion. We have this thing called a zettabyte. Go look it up. This is a vast number. So data will grow to 44 zettabytes in 2020 and 163 zettabytes annually by 2025. And analytics will become a 200 billion market. So cloud, data, and AI is really sort of at the core driving this innovation, if you will. So it's good to be aware of the need, but also the technology helping drive that. And I'm sure, talking to the audience here, you've probably heard of this thing called the fourth industrial revolution. So again, it's always good to look back over history. So, in the 1780s, we had things like steam. And then in the 1870s, we had electricity. Fast forward to the 60s and 70s, we had things like electronics and IT, PCs, servers, et cetera. Well, now look at 2015 and beyond to today. We're blurring the lines between digital and physical, which is kind of cool, right? And so let's take it one step further. The evolution of computing itself. So again, if we look back over time, in the 70s, we had things like the mainframe era. In the 80s, of course, Microsoft had a big role to play in personal computing. In the 2000s, mobility, again, was another really sort of fundamental mind shift change in terms of bring your own device and the way we consume data. And then in the 2010s, we have the cloud era and the acceptance of the cloud era. Not about is cloud here and now, it's about cloud and having a transformation strategy. It's cloud being credible, being here and enabling digital transformation. And look at 2020 and beyond, this notion of the ubiquity era. Millions of computers, millions of devices, many users. So this is sort of the state of the nation, if you will, that's changing around us as we go back to thinking about the supply chain and the challenges. But then at the core, we talked about cloud. So I just want to touch upon the Microsoft cloud, so Microsoft Azure, and we think about 4 key pillars. We think about the productive cloud, we think about hybrid cloud, intelligent cloud, and trusted cloud. So we have the ability to develop and support many development languages. We have over 100 services to be able to leverage to build solutions on the cloud. With hybrid cloud, we have capabilities to be public, private, and also on-premise with things like Azure Stack. So that's great. We have that agility to be able to think multidimensionally and provide the computing capabilities on demand where is needed. With intelligent cloud, of course, we have things like intelligent apps driven by artificial intelligence and being able to drive meaningful insights on top of all that data that we talked about being generated. And of course, at the core, trusted cloud. Security and compliance is key. So we make huge investments around that. Security and compliance is at the core. We support over 90 plus compliance certifications. So security and compliance is key for us, and of course is point of mind for anyone thinking about moving to the cloud.
Especially in retail.
That's right.
GDPR,
right.
California protection law.
That's right. And I'm going to touch briefly here because I know you have something to say on IoT. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention sort of the IoT data explosion. So we've talked about cloud and our capabilities and services. So with Azure IoT, we're able to embrace all these IoT devices, the signals from sensors and devices, and then capture that and drive it into meaningful insights and push it even to the edge, to these intelligence to these devices themselves. But I know you had a perspective on IoT.
Well, what we see, I think, in retail especially, is IoT has been adopted very well in manufacturing, more so in the manufacturing space than the retail space.
Right.
And there's definitely overlap between the two. Retailers have a supply chain. They some manufacture their own goods.
Right.
So as a result, you see a bit of a blurring of the line.
Yep.
I think what's interesting is we're seeing a lot of adoption in IoT for efficiency, especially in creating goods and maybe tracking goods.
Right.
Not so much on the retail experience side.
Yeah.
I think you see a little bit of investment there, a little bit of exciting experiences on the edge, but just not as much in kind of that front edge of retail as we see kind of in the backside of retail.
Great point, Chris. But let me show you the next slide. So let's look at some of the predictions. So what are the analysts saying, and what are we seeing in the industry? So in terms of this IoT opportunity that we hope we'll see embraced, these are some tremendous numbers. So 80 billion connected things by 2025, generating, here's that zettabyte number again, 180 zettabytes of data. I mean, that's just vast.
Amazing amount of data, yeah.
130 billion in new potential monetization avenues related to IoT. So going back to your point, I think IoT is there, but it's super important, strategic for people to embrace and to adopt. 80% of companies will have increased revenue as a result of the IoT implementation. 100 million in increased operating income. So I think the point you're making is IoT in terms of capabilities and advancements has come a long way. I think the market needs to catch up. I think that kind of one of the key takeaways here is go explore IoT. Go explore IoT on Azure. And you see here the predictions, the opportunity is vast in terms of just being able to drive meaningful insights from these devices and these sensors, but also the monetization opportunity is vast also.
Absolutely.
So super interesting to see. So let's just look at the traditional supply chain, and this slide just covers really sort of some of the main talking points and the needs to drive an efficient supply chain. So really look at things like everything from unidirectional information flow to being able to move to driving much more efficiencies in the supply chain. I think it's moving to being reactive as well versus and being able to adapt in our mode of operations is super important. And we talked a little bit earlier about just the need for greater visibility into the supply chain itself. So my summary with all of that, supply chain needs to evolve. But what could that look like? And as we now pull together some of the technology that we just introduced and we talked about, and we think about the supply chain of the future and leveraging technology, well, of course, there's three things I would call out: intelligent data, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. So if you think about just cloud as the fundamentals, so we think about connecting and visualizing the supply chain, cloud provides that accessibility, that real-time visibility into everything that's happening. Now let's think about using things like artificial intelligence and predictive models, machine learning, so predicting and being able to be proactive. So when we think about predictive analytics, let's talk about things like being able to make intelligent recommendations on purchasing, being able to predict really buying behaviors and needed buying behaviors. And then let's also look at things like blockchain, right? And so it's a big buzz of the moment around blockchain. I think there's a lot of work going on around sort of real good use cases for blockchain. Well, when you think about retail and when you think about supply chain, being able to democratize and secure the value chain. So around things like provenance, where did this originate? Things like payments is super strategic. Think about traceability, or even things like contracts. Blockchain can have a huge role to play there.
Absolutely. Yeah, blockchain is a very promising technology, and we're starting to have those conversations. People are thinking about it. It's still early days for blockchain, even though it's a fun technology to work with for sure.
I think so. I mean, again, I think the takeaway is we've got some great innovation on the technology. I think the consortiums are driving some great work around the use cases. And so I think it's just really empowering that information, making the smart choices on being less about being technology driven, but being business driven, and how can the technology help with the business scenario. So
Absolutely.
I think we're all super excited about blockchain, but I think the key for it is finding the right use cases. So I think the consortiums are doing a super job there in terms of finding real business value. And so I'm going to close, pull it kind of full circle a little bit. So we talked about Microsoft and our play around supply chain. So what was our approach when we talked about really modernizing our supply chain, moving away from the legacy systems? Well, there are three things I'm going to call out. So, of course, we built a modern supply chain by building on the cloud. So we have this interconnected, aligned world, if you will, around the supply chain. Looking at things like using artificial intelligence and machine learning, we moved into that much more reactive and predictive world. So we can use the intelligence and data and machine learning and artificial intelligence to help us drive much more meaningful insights. And then finally, much greater agility and responsiveness as we think about driving net new capabilities and also leveraging our partner ecosystems, of course, and driving new business models. So we're super excited in terms of our transformation that we've been on, the journey we've been on as Microsoft, moving to this modern supply chain, really applying it to the way we think about retail and supply chain in terms of what kind of we as Microsoft drive around kind of our retail assets that we talked about a little earlier on. And so, hopefully, some pointers of where to go kind of land some more stuff. So there's a plethora of information. So I'd call out to go to Microsoft.com/retail. There's tons of great things like videos and perspectives and lots of fun stuff. And you can follow some of our leaders around retail there and their blogs. And also I'll put a plug in there also for Marketplace. So Marketplace is our new transformative e-commerce platform to being able to basically go transact online. So that's a new distribution method, being able to commerce, a storefront, get access to resellers in our field. So again, go check that out on things like Microsoft AppSource and Marketplace. So lots of great content.
Absolutely. I think the Marketplace and AppSource is a great call out, whether you're working with hot technology or you're early on that hype curve.
Right.
We have a very strong partner network that can help you implement solutions anywhere along that curve right now. It's an exciting, fun time to be in retail.
Cool.
Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Really appreciate your insights. I think this has been a great presentation. So thank you so much for being here.
And thanks so much for having me.
Well, everybody, thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode of Hot or Hype.